This is the Kingpin, and you're listening to the Air Raid Hour of Buffalo Fanatics Video Experience.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can join me. You can follow me, as always, on Twitter at Judge Mathis. And I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. I was just expressing to Dave and Ryan Sullivan, who we have backstage today, special guest Ryan Sullivan of the 5A5 Report, that I spent this weekend at a bachelor party in San Diego. And as I get older, I can still handle the festivities like the BF golf tournament and the bachelor party in San Diego this weekend. But the effects that these weekends have on my body is starting to show as I flubbed that introduction there. But how are you doing today?
I remember those days. Funny enough, my 21st birthday, I kind of did what you did. I went to Phoenix. Obviously, you live there, but then we drove to San Diego, and the festivities ensued, and there was a lot of the same types of things happening that you described. And back then, I was 21. My body could handle it, and that was still rough the next day. So I can only imagine now. I'm doing okay. I want to ask just really quick for the viewers who are filing in, for everyone. My daughter is sick. She has a fever of 102 right now, but she's sleeping. Just prayers up for her tonight. I hope she gets better in the morning. I'm on the show tonight because she's sleeping now. So anything you can send my way to just, give her a thought or two, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, and hopefully, the good vibes come, because we are talking about the Buffalo Bills schedule prediction tonight. And obviously, I think most of us are super pumped about that. But before we get started with that, you can see at the bottom of the screen, the ticker is back. And what it says on the ticker is, if you guys at all miss the show live or want to listen back to it again, audio version and stuff, we are now located at Buffalo Football Weekly. So if you go into your iTunes account, your Spotify account, wherever it is you listen to your podcast. I don't think we're in Apple iTunes yet. We should be Apple Podcasts yet. We should be there soon. I don't think it's gone through yet, but Buffalo Football Weekly is where you can find the Air Raid Hour every Tuesday and Friday. We'll be posting the recasts of this show, so you can catch us on demand at Buffalo Football Weekly. And the reason why we're switching to this new podcasting home is because we want to bring you some more original content throughout the season. Obviously, Buffalo Fanatics chocked full. Tuesday is Rico, Wednesday is the Film Room and Z-Bot and all that stuff. You got 5A5 Report. We're going to bring on Ryan Sullivan in a moment, Kyle Knapp. So we're chocked full here at Buffalo Fanatics. We don't want to be taking any time away from all those other great content creators. So we're going to be moving some audio only stuff. Every week I'm going to be sitting down with an opponent's podcaster or YouTube personality. Like this week I'm sitting down with somebody from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're going to be talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelers. That should drop on Thursday morning. I'm talking with the Pittsburgh Steelers Bills backers bar about how they're preparing for this weekend, what the city of Pittsburgh is like, and how they're feeling about the Bills and about their team. And if you ever find yourself in Pittsburgh, where you can go to find the Pittsburgh Bills backers bar. That'll be dropping this Saturday. And there's a ton of different draft stuff that I think we want to publish throughout the year. Myself, you, if you want to jump in, Casey Reed, might get Randy Hardman involved. We want to do some draft stuff this year, because one of the things that I was proudest of last year was the draft content we created. Want to try to make it even better this year. We're getting the party rolling early. I spent the entire weekend watching college football. Me and Casey Reed are sharing a list on our iPhones right now of just players back and forth that we're going to be scouting up. So yeah, Randy, I'll be hitting you up and we'll be putting some draft stuff on there. So Buffalo Football Weekly, it's not on Apple yet, but it should be soon. It's definitely on Spotify, Google, Spreaker, or Breaker, a couple of those other ones, Google Podcasts. So check out Buffalo Football Weekly for the recast of this show on demand if you want to listen to it on the ride to work, etc. And also for some more original content as well. And some of that original content will also be restreamed on the BF Tailgate. So if you don't catch it on the Buffalo Football Weekly, you can catch some segments on the BF Tailgate as well, which is back this Sunday. I'm pretty proud about that. We'll give you some details for that on Thursday. Adam Shepard says, game week, boys. And yes, it is. The comment section was full go, ready to roll. So we're going to right away bring in our guest today, Ryan Sullivan of the 585 Report, and we're going to start breaking down our expectations for the Buffalo Bills season. Before we do that, Sergio Chavez came with a super chat. He said prayers and wishing for your little girl gets better, Dave. So thank you, Sergio. We appreciate that. And Ryan, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful. Didn't have as eventful as a long weekend as you. I did go down. I did go down and see the Yankees lose yesterday, so that was kind of disappointing. But I did clean my whole house, so that was kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And Ombre Lob comes in and says, let's have some fun and let's talk Bills, and let's do just that. What we're going to do here today is we're going to go, it used to be 4 weeks and 4 weeks, right? 4 week, 4 week, 4 week, 4 week. We'd break the season down in quarters, but then the NFL had to throw a wrench at us this year and add a 17th game. So in one of these slots here, we're going to add the 5th game as we break down the Buffalo Bills schedule. But before we get started, before we start breaking down the schedule and looking at it week by week and quarter by quarter, if I gave you the over under 13 games, what are you going for the Buffalo Bills this year? I know, Dave, you already released yours, but over under 13 games, what's your prediction for the Buffalo Bills? What are you taking if you're a betting man?
I mean, you're going to have to set it at with a half in there, right? Because my prediction is exactly 13. So if you say, if you make it 13 and a half, or if you make it 12 and a half, I go either direction, right? So I've got it at 13 on the number. So 13 and a half, I'll go under. 12 and a half, I'll go over. As of right now, the sportsbook I use anyway, sportsbook.ag, has the Bills over under total at 11 and a half, which I really like the over. However, I think that number is going to creep up in the coming days, I would imagine, as you get those last minute bets coming in on the season futures. And Jessica says Vegas has it as 11. So anywhere from 11 to 11 and a half. It's a little concerning, I think, because Vegas is usually pretty dead on with these things, and they only have the Bills at 11 and a half. We know Damon Talbot came on the Casey and Knapp show and said 9, and I'm sitting here thinking 13. And I'm kind of getting not heat, but like, you saw the chart of the BF personalities in loss prediction. You and I were at the bottom with 13 wins. So 13, we're getting some heat for only picking 13 wins, which to me is an incredible year. So give me 13 wins, and I think we're going to be happy, man, with 13 wins.
And we're used to that heat, right? Last year, I think we both picked like 10 wins, but we
10
said
or 9,
we said like 9 or 10, but we said with the caveat that we still thought with those 9 or 10, the Bills were going to win the division and win a playoff game, and that still wasn't good enough for the people. And the people were right. We were the ones who looked like fools at the end of the season for being too conservative, and that's why I threw the number at 13, because I knew you picked 13, because I wanted you to make that decision. If someone put a gun to your head and said, make a decision over or under of your projected 13, what would you do? Because for me, I'm taking the over.
I'll take over. If you have to make me pick, if not 13, I would take over. Just because as we start to go through the schedule, and I think Aaron Quinn made a really good point on Twitter about this. It's like, when you make these predictions right now, like, you predict on paper, right, what you think, if you're going to do it straight away, like no emotion, no variables, like you go straight by paper. You say the Bills should win 14 games, and you could say they would lose to Tampa, Kansas City, and who's the other one? I'm blanking right now, but there's 3 games on there where you could say they would lose.
Tennessee,
maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe Tennessee or at New England, right? One of those two. But that's not how these things work, right? Like, these things have tons of variables. You try to account for the ebbs and flows of the NFL season. It's very difficult to do in a 17-game season where you don't know things about injuries. You don't know things about, as teams get hot, how they're coming off primetime games, as they're going into primetime games. You got to look, kind of see who's coming off a bye, playing who. There's a lot of things to look into when you start coming up with a prediction. So predicting just the Bills is a lot easier than trying to come up with a win-loss prediction for every team, which I know some people do, but it is tough. It is tough.
And I think Pierre is the one who, like, Pierre picked 17-0. And you mentioned what Aaron Quinn said. Like, if you're looking at it on paper, no emotion. If you're looking at it on paper with no emotion, the Buffalo Bills have just as good of a roster as any team in the National Football League. You could say on paper, maybe we're going to get into the Pittsburgh game in a moment. There are some people who could look at it and say, well, I think Pittsburgh might be a better football team because of this, this, and this. Or it's like a 50-50 game or a 55-45 game favoring Buffalo. Like, it's tight. The Tennessee game, no pun intended, might be tight. The Kansas City game, you could make the argument Kansas City's better than us. Tampa Bay game, you could make the argument Tampa Bay's better than us. There are a couple of games in the schedule here and there where you could make the argument who's better than us. But at the end of the day, we have a better quarterback in 15 of 17 matchups this year. Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes are the only two quarterbacks that you could really make an argument are better than Josh Allen. So that tells you that the Buffalo Bills legitimately have a chance to win all 17 games this season. We've never gone into a season since like 1994 where you could say the Buffalo Bills have a shot to win every game on their schedule. And they do this year, and I predicted 3 losses. My 3 predictions were Kansas City, Tampa Bay, and the Washington football team. But the Washington football team, the only one I threw in there. I threw in there because I said,
wait, you had 13, I thought.
I had 13 as well. 13-4.
So who's your 4th then?
Oh, New England on the road. I think I had a loss to New England on the road.
Okay.
So in my prediction, I had a loss to New England on the road. And the reason why, I'm on the clock here for my fantasy draft. Just took Devin Singletary. I get another pick. I get back-to-back picks. I need to take a quarterback. Hold on real quick. But my other loss here was to, I only get 1 minute in this league. Hold on 1 second while I got to find a quarterback to draft. Any suggestions on?
You guys are getting live draft coverage right now, like Judge said on Buffalo Weekly, but it's his fantasy draft.
I'm trying to Jalen Hurts, Ryan Tannehill. I waited on a quarterback. I waited way too long. I might just have to take Baker here.
Oh yeah, I would definitely take Baker. I would definitely take Baker over those other 2 you mentioned.
I just took Baker. Yeah. Josh Allen went a pick before me. I was so excited in the first pick of the 4th round to get Josh Allen, or the last pick of the 4th round to get Josh Allen, and someone snagged him right before me. I was pretty upset about that. But yeah, my bad. So now we're back on track. I do apologize for that. I had the first pick in this draft, and it's my in-laws draft, so I logged on at 5:30, like 5:31 for a 5:30 fantasy draft, and they don't mess around. It's 1 minute per pick. And
I like that.
They auto picked. I like it too, but they auto picked my first overall pick. So they were all yelling at me for not making it on time. I'm like, Jesus, I'm not used to having the first pick. What do you want from me? Stafford was gone. I almost took Matt Ryan instead.
Now, did you know you had the first pick, or was it random?
Before? I knew this morning that I had the first pick. So that is my bad. But anyway, back to the Buffalo Bills schedule. I do think that, maybe this is the conservative in me. Maybe this is the pessimist in me. I always predict 1 or 2 losses that I don't expect, and I try to find that place in the schedule. And we're going to walk into it. And where I think the two places where I could see the Buffalo Bills losing a game where maybe people don't expect is at New England, because as Kendall, who's not here today, mentioned, New England has literally built their roster to beat the Buffalo Bills. They devoted their whole offseason to us because that's how shook they are of us as a team, and the Washington football team, just because of how good their defense is and all the weapons that Ryan Fitzpatrick has to play with on that offense and a decent offensive line they have. But that being said, Ryan, you're a guest and we're barely letting you speak here, so I do apologize for that.
You're good.
13 over under. What are you taking?
So I'll take the heat off you guys. I have them at 12-5, and not because I think they got worse, not because I think this team can't go just as far. I just think this schedule this year is a little bit more top heavy. Pittsburgh, say what you want about Roethlisberger, say what you want about, they're going to have a pretty bad offensive line rolling out there. Mike Tomlin's a really good coach, and he's going to have his guys ready to go. And they had some close games. The McDermott teams always finish strong. They don't always come out of the gates executing the best. Yes, they started 4-0 last year, but some of those games were super ugly. Josh fumbled a couple times in that Jets game. That Dolphins game was a lot closer. And you couple that with the fact that New England, I won't got a lot better. I don't think Mac Jones is going to be the reason they get better, but I just think that's a team that's going to have a scary defensive line and a scary run game. Miami, it's not. I don't think we're going to go on a run of beating Miami 30 times in a row. So a loss is going to come in there somewhere down the line. And even the Jets, they're not going to win a bunch of games, but they're going to be a pesky team to play. They're going to be a team at some point, whether it's Buffalo, whether it's another team, they're going to steal a win from someone because they're well coached, because they brought in some interesting players this year, and it'll be kind of like that first Brian Flores Miami team where they won 5 games. but they were a decent team. And I know you're going to say I'm a hater, but I still think they can go and win the Super Bowl. I just think over the course of I think there was games last year where when you play close games, that's not necessarily the most easy thing to replicate on a year-to-year basis. And you look at things like point differential and stuff. So I think there might be just a chance of a ball bouncing the wrong way, injuries happening. There's still these COVID regulations, and we know this is one of the least vaccinated team in the league. So, without getting into the money, there's a chance that there could be a game where we go in with a bunch of guys where our whole wide receiver room is out or something like that. So I just think that's all stuff. This team is still phenomenal. I just think over the course of 17 games, there's just going to be some randomness that happens, and they might not get so many lucky bounces because I think they're playing a little bit better of a schedule. You look at these teams, the only real laugher of a team they have on this entire schedule is Houston. Everyone else on this schedule, I think, is at least okay. Is coached to an okay level or is on an upward trajectory. So I just think that it's a tough schedule, and they'll still win the division, and they'll still be in really good position to make a deep run into the playoffs.
All right, let's take a look at that schedule now, and let's look at the first 4 games of the season. We start off with Pittsburgh at home on opening day, 1:00 game, the perfect sort of time period for a Buffalo Bills game. It's gonna be the first home crowd in a regular season game. I expect the crowd to be absolutely wild. Then we go at Miami, who we always seem to play in Miami now early on in the season. I think the NFL likes to send Miami to us in the winter now. I think it's something that they do enjoy, even though I think that game might have been moved up a little bit this year. And then we have the Washington football team at home, that extra game, and Houston at home. So Pittsburgh at Miami, Washington, and Houston. What do you think the Buffalo Bills record is going to be coming out of those first 4 games? And what are some predictions you're willing to make over those first 4 games? Dave, I'll start with you.
Well, I will say this. I like that you have 3 of the first 4 at home, and obviously we're going to get to the end where we end with 3 of 4 at home as well, which I love. The first week at home is great. It's a little bit of a feeling out game for both teams. The good thing about that is we've played Pittsburgh the last 2 years in a row. For a team that's not in our division, there's now some familiarity there because now it's the 3rd year in a row we're playing them. We can get to your boy Lettuce's super chat if you want, and then I can get back into my thought. He does say,
finish your thought here, and we'll get to you boys.
And like you said, Washington, with Fitzpatrick, they're gonna be pesky. I like the word Ryan used to describe the Jets. I think Washington will be pesky. They have 4 first rounders on that defensive line. They've got weapons now with Curtis Samuel, who played with the Panthers under Rivera. They've got McLaurin. They've got Antonio Gibson. They've got a good offensive line. That game's not going to be easy, although we are fortunate to play it at home. The last time we played Washington at home with Dwayne Haskins, it was obviously 2 years ago, but we struggled to kind of finish off that game a little bit. And so Houston, like Ryan said, I think that to me is the slam dunk win on that first slate of 4. But you can make the case that if you're not 4-0 through those first 4 games, that it's a disappointment. I think 3-1 to me is absolute worst case scenario for those first 4. And to be honest with you, I actually think the most likely loss is week 1 out of those 4 games. I think we're gonna beat Washington. I think the Bills just have too much firepower. Pittsburgh is the one game that kind of worries me. The last couple of years we've started against the Jets, and it's been kind of like that starting against the Division II college game. I know it's different in the NFL, but Pittsburgh, they won a ton of games last year. They still have a good defense. I know their offensive line is suspect. That's going to be the biggest advantage the Bills have, but 3-1 is worst case scenario of those first 4 games. You got to expect 4-0.
All right, we got your boy Yellow. Super chat here. He says, anybody who has Buffalo winning less than 11 games are just trying to be the next Nick Wright. Whew. That might be the biggest insult right now in Bills land, is comparing somebody to Nick Wright. But don't worry. Everyone here has them winning more than 11 games. Ryan comes in at 12, and we each come in at 13. So nobody here is trying to be the next Nick Wright. Nobody on this screen is trying to be the next Nick Wright. But thank you, your boy. Really appreciate that. And I know he said he expects a 4-0 start or a 3-1 start, but 14-3 overall. Ryan, what are your expectations for the first 4 games? Is anything less than 4-0 a disappointment? And is sort of who's the biggest threat to ding us in the first 4 games?
I'm gonna, I would say Pittsburgh, but I think Pittsburgh with no TJ Watt playing, with they're rolling out a rookie left tackle. I think it came out today. I think they're rolling out with a rookie or a second-year center. So they're going to be really hampered there for a week 1 game with guys who maybe don't have a ton of first-team reps at that spot. So I kind of shift, and I either look at Miami or I look at Washington as games they could lose. I think you have to come out of 3-1, but I think those are the 2 games you got to look at. Washington has a phenomenal defense, and if that's a game they can keep close, then, and they can force Josh's hand in some bad throws, and they can hurry up his process and really give that line trouble. Chase Young is a game wrecker. He's one of those dudes like Aaron Donald or like TJ Watt, where if your tackle's having a bad game, that can ruin your game plan. He can single-handedly ruin your game plan. So there's always an issue with that. And I think Miami, we've won 4 in a row, and I think they have to prove they can stop Josh. And until then, we can't assume they will. But I think Brian Flores is a good coach, and at some point he's going to figure out something to do with that team. And whether it's this week or the last their week, whatever they play down the line, I think there's always a possibility that eventually Brian Flores is going to figure it out, because I think he's a smart guy. 4-0. I mean, they'll be favored in all these games, so I really think they will be 4-0 through this. But I wouldn't be disappointed or upset with 3-1.
We got Dawn Keith coming in. She says, I actually have us losing to the Steelers, but it's because Big Ben will be healthy and he will be more mobile and able to throw. And I worry we'll be looking forward to Miami. That last statement right there, we'll be looking forward to Miami. Dawn, I want to direct you back to an interview that Zbot and Clay Troya did with Levi Wallace at the Western Media Day. They sat down with Levi Wallace, and this was during OTAs in March. And they said, can you name the second team on your schedule this year? Because the schedule was just released like the week before. So this was fresh after roster schedule release. And Levi Wallace said, I can't tell you who we play after the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Zbot and Clay were like, what? And he's like, my only concern right now in March is the Pittsburgh Steelers. After that game is over, I'll worry about our opponent week 2. And after we beat that opponent week 2, I'll worry about the opponent week 3. So that is the mindset that Sean McDermott has embedded into this football team. You got a guy like Levi Wallace doesn't even know who the second opponent for the Buffalo Bills is this season, because his sole focus, but hey, it was a soundbite, and that's what he said was
I don't believe him.
Steelers. You don't believe him? No. I don't know if I believe him either, but I love the soundbite. I love that clip. I absolutely love that soundbite when it came out. And the Buffalo Bills, I believe right now, are 6.5 point favorites over the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would take that bet. I think the Buffalo Bills win by 2 touchdowns and running away week 1. I think they put an absolute stomping on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Me and Greg Force had this conversation a couple of weeks ago when I was filling in for Rico on the Rico Report. He thinks the Buffalo Bills are going to lay an absolute bomb on the Pittsburgh Steelers and really set the tone for the season. And I'm in 100% agreement with him.
I would love it.
You look at this. First of all, you have the home crowd for the first time in over 2 years on a 1 o'clock game on a Sunday. You know they're going to be rowdy. You know they're going to be ready. I understand the Pittsburgh Steelers are healthier. Guys like Big Ben are healthier. But that offensive line is atrocious. And some people have pointed out to me like, well, they've played pretty good this preseason. They look pretty good this preseason. Ben Roethlisberger threw those 2 touchdowns to Freiermuth week 3. They've held up. Najee's look good, et cetera, et cetera. Those 5 guys in that stadium week 1, and the fact that they have to play more than 1 or 2 quarters. They have to go a full 4 quarters in that football game for the first time for some of these guys in a very long time. They have to go a full 4 quarters against a defensive line in the Buffalo Bills that are going to be rolling 8 deep. AJ Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, Boogie Basham, Starlo Tulele, Ed Oliver, Harrison Phillips, Justin Zimmer. We're going to be sending these guys at this offensive line in absolute waves. I don't know how much Najee can get loose and do damage that way. I don't know how Ben Roethlisberger, because just because he's healthier doesn't mean he's mobile. He is still a freaking statue back there, and he's going to have a very hard time stepping back into the pocket and making throws downfield. They're going to have to rely on that dinking and dunking. And when the Buffalo Bills are running that zone and keeping things in front of them, I'm not 100% sure what the Pittsburgh Steelers will do. I think the Buffalo Bills are going to have one of the better offenses in the National Football League this year. I think they're going to be thrown all over people, and I think the run game is going to be much improved. You look at this Pittsburgh team in the secondary. Joe Hayden, you got Minkah Fitzpatrick, but then it's, Terrell Edmonds, who didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. They had to trade for Ahkello Witherspoon. They got, Cameron Sutton. They don't exactly have a bunch of dogs in that secondary. And as you mentioned, TJ Watt might play. He might not play. And even if he does play, that's a guy who has not had a full training camp because he's only been doing individual drills. They're missing Stephon Tuitt. Cam Hayward and Tyson Alualu are another year older. There's not a lot of depth on that defensive line. I think the Buffalo Bills are going to put an absolute spanking on the Pittsburgh Steelers to start the season. Then I think they're going to go to Miami. They're probably going to do a little bit of the same. And then I think Washington game is when they're going to come back down to earth a little bit because I think that defense is legit. Whether they win or they don't, I still think the Buffalo Bills finish that 4-game stretch 4-0. And Jake Jordan came in with a great comment earlier, and I lost it. But Tyrod Taylor has been announced the starting quarterback of the Houston Texans. Do you give him a standing O if you're in the crowd of the Bills of the stands? What do you guys think? Ryan, what do you think? Do you give Tyrod a standing O?
Hard, yes. Hard. You got Tyrod. It's not like he's a guy who left and he trashed town. And he's a guy who, for 2-3 years, busted his butt, was classy, said all the right things, was a leader on this team. And however you want to divvy up responsibility for who broke the drought, he was the quarterback that broke the drought. He was 2-time Pro Bowl quarterback for this team. He was the best quarterback this team had in the drought, full stop. You gotta show your appreciation. He's a good dude who just wherever he goes, busts his butt. I love that, and maybe I have more love for Tyrod than the average man, but I think you gotta show the man. If I'll put it this way, if we gave a standing ovation to Andy Dalton, we better give a standing ovation to Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah. Tyrod is probably just as responsible for breaking that drought. But yeah, a lot of people coming in saying absolutely. I think Randy's the only no. And even if you don't give him a standing O, at least clap the man and cheer him on. If he starts to beat us, then you can try to get in his head a little bit. But I'm not too worried about that Houston Texans team. A couple of good comments coming in about the first 4 games. Sergio Chavez says, please don't say we lose to Washington football team. That'll be my first game in Buffalo. I would love a win. So the Buffalo Bills officially have to win that game for Sergio because he's traveling a long way here from the West Coast to get to that Washington football team. And feck him coming in saying the Steelers don't have the personnel. It'll get ugly quick if we line them up 5 wide. You kind of saw it when Josh Allen was out there against the Green Bay Packers. And yes, they were backups. You saw it with Mitch Trubisky against the Chicago Bears. Yes, it was backups. But the Buffalo Bills, I think this year are going to be just as able to go 5 wide and dink and dunk you as they are to put the big play on you. And if you're going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers and you're worried about TJ Watt, spread them out 5 wide. We got the personnel to get the ball in the hands and get the yards after catch from the line of scrimmage or around the line of scrimmage and move that ball down the football field. So even if a guy like TJ Watt is going to be there, Josh Allen is not the quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger, who's going to need to take 5 steps. He can get out of the pocket. He can make plays out of the pocket. And he's showing now an ability to make those quick hitters and get the ball into the hands of his playmakers and get those yards after the catch. So I think he's right on the dot there with the fact that the Buffalo Bills can spread them out 5 wide and really take advantage of that Pittsburgh team, who I really don't think is that deep on defense. They have some talented players. I just don't think they're very deep. And none of those guys have played a full 4 quarters in a very, very long time. And I think that's to the offense's advantage. Your boy Lettuce coming in saying Ben is spent. That O-line is going to finish his career before week 10. That's to be seen. But yeah, I've said this before and I'll say it again. And I'm really interested to hear what some of the guys from Pittsburgh have to say when I get a chance to talk to them this week. I think that team is a house of cards. And I've been scanning the local, the shows and all that stuff. And there's a much different perspective if you talk to the people in Pittsburgh about their football team. They're excited about this coming year with Freiermuth and with Chase Claypool going into year 2 and Deontay Johnson and Najee Harris. And, with the pieces they do have on defense, there's a lot of optimism there in Pittsburgh, especially with Ben Roethlisberger healthy. But I just don't know, man. Maybe I'm just being way too much of a Bills homer. I'm not seeing it with this Pittsburgh Steelers team the way some people in the national media are and the way people in Pittsburgh are. Narham123 comes in with the super chat. Always appreciate you, Narham. Hey man, if you want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a comment, question, whatever you want. your time to shine in this comment section. So we appreciate the super chat. But next time, hit us up with a comment, man. And anything you want to get off your chest, let us know, and we will share it. And I like Renaissance Man coming in saying Josh Allen now has the ability to lull you to sleep with 7 intermediate throws in a row and then throw a laser on a rope to Davis for a touchdown. I really, really like that. And then Sale Argo bringing us back down to earth here saying it's the NFL, people calm down. Any given Sunday, pray and stay healthy. It is the NFL and it is any given Sunday. So yes, got to roll with you on that one as well.
Let me ask you this, Judge. If could you see a situation, and I'm just playing both sides of the coin here because you both said that it should, and a lot of people are saying it should be a runaway. If we get into a situation where it's like this has happened in 2 straight home openers now, right? Or 2 season openers that they have a couple bad turnovers in bad spots. They maybe get a little bit sluggish. If you get into a situation where the Steelers are in positive game script and they're able to just kind of pound the rock with Najee Harris, do you think that's a harder team to come back against than if you kind of just get out and trounce them early? That's at least for me, that's my fear. If we get out, like you said, and we get up 2 touchdowns early and we force them to bend the play reckless, but are you worried that if we get out a little bit sloppy that it might be hard to come back?
No, I'm not too worried about it. I think that this team is one of the more, I think this team is pretty resilient and they seem like a team that can score a ton of points in a hurry, right? Like this is the team that has those playmakers and that has a quarterback in Josh Allen who can make up some points. So I do think that we have the luxury this year that we might not have had in previous years where we can get down. That being said, I don't want to see it happen because I think anyone is a Bills fan, right? Like I mean, the opening team comes down and kicks a field goal on us and goes up 3-0, and I'm having a full-blown panic attack as a fan. Like that's just who I am, right? Like we could be playing the Houston Texans week 1. Tyrod can be sacked on the first play. They can run a draw play for 6 yards in the second play. Tyrod heaves up a prayer that's caught, and they end up kicking a field goal on the first drive, even though it looked ugly as shit. And I'm still having a full-blown panic attack. The Buffalo Bills are down 3-0 on the Houston Texans with 11 minutes to go in the first quarter. Like that's just the type of fan I am. I lose how I'm still alive and breathing after some of these games we played the last couple of years. I have no freaking clue. But that being said, this team is a team that has the ability to make some of these comebacks. So I'm not too worried. All right. On to the schedule some more. Let's look at the second chunk of games. Week 5, the Buffalo Bills on Sunday Night Football. Now I will be watching this game from the Catalina Islands in California, by the way. Humble brag. I'll be watching this game from the Catalina Islands in California. Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, then the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football. Then you come back at home versus Miami on Halloween. Josh Allen is going to be the Freddy Krueger to these, or he might be the what's that guy from Saw that just carves people up? Jigsaw.
Yeah.
Josh Allen's going to be the Jigsaw this year, maybe on October 31st, way he's going to carve up those Miami Dolphins at home. And then you got the Jacksonville Jaguars to round that out. And there's a bye week sandwiched in the middle. So it's Kansas City primetime, Tennessee primetime, both on the road, bye week, home game versus the Miami Dolphins, and then down into Jacksonville to play, hopefully, Urban Meyer, if he still has a job, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So what are your guys' thoughts on the back half of the schedule? We'll start with you. Ryan.
On the back half, which segment are you talking about?
That next schedule of games where we got the Chiefs, the Titans, both in prime time on the road, followed by a bye week, followed by what was it? I'm losing my mind. The Miami at home and Jacksonville on the road.
I think I don't need to beat Kansas City, right? I want to see us be competitive with Kansas City on the road. I want to see us go into Kansas City and for 4 quarters have a game. I don't need to see them beat them there, but this for 2 games last year, it was not close. And that's the team you got to beat. Tennessee's a team that I'm low on. I think lower on than most people because I think
they don't have a defense.
Well, they don't have a defense. Until that defense proves it can do something, and they're banking on rookies to step up. Right, that's ever a good thing. They're banking on Elijah Molden to be productive. They're banking on Caleb Farley to be healthy and be productive. So they're banking on picks to work out immediately for them, which normally isn't a good sign. And I ate it last year when I kind of predicted that Tannehill would regress, but now without Arthur Smith, I think a lot of his success was predicated upon Arthur Smith's play call. And who knows, maybe Todd Downing can replicate that, but it's hard. Even if you're running the same type of offense, when you lose a play caller, that can change things a little bit, especially for a guy who wasn't great before Arthur Smith and then became good with Arthur Smith. So, when you look at those really 3 games, I think you got to win 1 out of Tennessee and Kansas City. And then I think you got to go in and you got to handle business, right? I think something McDermott teams generally do very well is winning the games you're supposed to. And it's not always pretty. They don't always win those games pretty, but you got to go. So if we're looking at those games, I think if you go 1-1 against Kansas City and Tennessee and you get 1 against, and you got to do your job against Jacksonville. So I think 2-1 over that is set is what I'm looking at.
We got Brendan P coming in, new member. Always appreciate the new members to the Bing Squad. Welcome, Brendan. A warm welcome to Buffalo Fanatics. Bing, bingity, bing, as Rico would say. Welcome. And I wish I had my bell. I don't have my bell out in front of me. I do apologize. I'm gonna get the bell out for the next show. And then we got your boy Lettuce coming in with a super chat. He says the cures of the Bills fans. God could guarantee a Super Bowl, or the cures of the Bills fans. God could guarantee a Super Bowl win, and we'll fret with every bad play turn. You're right. If it doesn't look like a Madden simulation where we smack a team 49-7, I'm usually leaving the game with a bad taste in my mouth. That's just who I am. I'm an overanalyzer and overthinker, and I think a lot of people are with me on that one. But Dave, what are your thoughts for this next stretch? I mean, some big games for the Buffalo Bills. 3-1, 4-0, most likely heading into at Kansas City with Chris Collinsworth and Mike Tirico on Sunday night. Then after that, it's going to be, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to be watching the Manning broadcast of that game when the Buffalo Bills are taking on the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football. And then it's a bye week. And then it's the 2 Florida teams, Miami in the division and Jacksonville. What are your thoughts on that stretch of 4 games in the sort of the second quarter of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think like what Ryan said, like the Bills don't have to beat the Chiefs, but I will say this. The Bills, if they want to get to where they really want to go, and that's to win the Super Bowl, at some point you're going to have to beat Kansas City. And in my mind, if you can show that you can beat Kansas City in the regular season, it's going to boost your confidence in the inevitable situation that you're likely going to face them in the playoffs at some point, whether that's in the AFC Championship game or otherwise. Again, until you've gotten over that hump and you've proven you can beat the Chiefs if you're the Bills, there's always going to be that stigma, that mental hurdle you're going to have to climb. We talked about this last year with the Bills finally getting over the mental hurdle of beating the Patriots, right? It was such a long time for them to finally get that confidence and say, like, okay, now we're the team to beat, but we still got to go and beat the Patriots. There's a mental aspect now of the Bills playing the Chiefs. This is 2 years in a row. This will now be the 3rd year in a row. We've lost to them twice, right? I shouldn't say 3rd year in a row. We played them twice last year and lost both games. We now have to kind of prove that we can beat them. And to me, this is a great opportunity. It's early enough in the season to where if you lose, it's not a big deal, but you can go out and still kind of remember that bad feeling you had coming off that field in the AFC Championship game, and you can take that into this game. So in my mind, I could see the Bills getting up really hard for that Chiefs game. They might not win, but I think that they will play the Chiefs a lot better than they did in that AFC Championship game last year. And the Titans, I would agree. It is a road game. They did beat us last year. It was kind of an ugly situation. The COVID sort of rescheduling, we didn't know when it was going to happen. It ended up getting rescheduled. The Bills did not play their best game, turned the ball over early in that one, and never really got it going. The Titans defense is still bad, but it was bad last year too. I mean, they did add Bud Dupree, but they did lose, a number of people as well. They've lost a lot of people on that team. Generally, they've added Julio. We know that. They still have King Henry. They've got AJ Brown. They've got Tannehill. Offensive line we'll see. But that's a team that I can't sit here and say that the Bills 100% are going to beat that team. It's not a guarantee. Like, we should, and then I think we'll take care of business at home against Miami. And Jacksonville comes at an interesting time in the season because by that time, the Jags can be spiraling out of control, like on the downside, right?
Yeah.
I think the Jags may start out with like a little momentum early in the season, but I think it's going to fade quickly. and Urban Meyer magic
could-
is.
Could the Buffalo Bills like end another career, right? Could Urban Meyer, like after a thumping in Buffalo, like fake a heart attack? Or I know it's in Jacksonville. Could he fake a heart attack in the middle of the halftime? Fake a heart attack walking in the locker room, fake a migraine, middle of the third quarter after the game. This could be the game for Urban Meyer where he just walks out on the Jaguars because he realizes the NFL ain't for him.
I mean, look, no ETN, obviously. That's a huge blow to the Jags. I would say it's more likely they're going to be spiraling downward than they are getting some huge, gain of momentum at that point in the season. I'd be very surprised. So I think 3-1, and as I start chunking off this schedule into these like sort of 4-game increments, and then you have the very last game at the end, which I believe is against the Jets, right? I'm like 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, and then win the last game, and that's how I get to my 13-4. So in this stretch of games, I would say 3-1. You're likely, at least right now, if you're predicting on paper, the 3-1, the loss is likely to come against the Chiefs, right? If you're going to predict.
Yeah, we got Fiakum coming in again with bold prediction. He says Casey's O-line won't live up to the hype. And I think there's something there, right? Because as he said that, I started to think about it. You look at their additions. You look at Orlando Brown, who he did play left tackle last season, but has primarily played right tackle in a run-heavy offense. Now he's playing in a spread passing offense, so there could be some growing pains there, or maybe he doesn't live up to the hype as a different type of offensive lineman. He did have some struggles in the preseason. You look at Joe Thuney, and you see a lot of those New England guys leave the nest of Dante Scarnecchia, who has even retired in New England, and they don't have success in other places. So Joe Thuney, who knows, as much of a high price free agent as he was. We've seen some of those high price free agents that leave New England and not quite work out. Kyle Long is obviously injured. He's going to miss this first half or so of the season. He hasn't played in years, so maybe that rust is just too much to overcome. And then you have a bunch of rookies there and guys that we liked in Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, but rookies are rookies, and it takes a long time to understand how to play offensive line in the National Football League. For some guys, it takes years. Cody Ford is still trying to figure it out. So you could really see what Fiakum has to say here really live up to the I just like saying his name at this point. Like, I'm not going to use the F word. I just love going Fiakum coming in here. He could be right in that prediction. And you hit the nail on the head when you said it. 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1. You look at every chunk of the season, and like maybe the pessimist in you tries to find that one loss, right? Like the Washington football team in that first chunk, and then Kansas City in that second chunk. And maybe we need to get over that hump as a fan. Like as Pierre said, 17-0.
But aren't we over that hump already? Like we went from being a drought team missing the playoffs for 20 years to now saying that 13 wins might not be optimistic. But I feel like we got to get there. We got to get there.
I have in my notes here 2 to 3 max losses. By this point, to have 2 to 3 maximum losses, like 3 losses is the worst that I would like to see at this point in the season. Like any other year, I'd be like, I hope we only have 3 losses at this point, even when we're like good, because this is like, as Ryan said, it's not the toughest schedule in the world because Josh Allen is probably the best quarterback in every single game, but these teams aren't exactly, with outside of Jacksonville and Houston, absolute pushovers either. So yeah, you're right. Maybe the mindset is shifted, because right in my notes, I'm like, if we have any more than 3 losses, I'm going to be freaking livid, and 3 losses might be pushing it. So, but we got John DeMarshi coming in here with a super chat saying, I am 51 behind enemy lines in the 305. I've never had so many non-716 fans tell me this is the year. And we saw another prediction today. Pete Prisco came out, picked the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl and Josh Allen to win MVP. So the national media is very much on this Buffalo Bills hype train. Who writes that column now for Peter King? Good football, whatever, for FMIA, right? It was either Peter King or Albert Breer, whichever one of them writes that article, came out. I didn't actually read the article. I only read the headline, but the headline made it pretty clear that whoever was writing that article, whether it was Breer or Peter King, has the Buffalo Bills winning the Super Bowl this year. So the national media is all behind the Josh Allen MVP hype train and the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl hype train. And John DeMarshi says he's all into 12-5. He's with you, Ryan, and Super Bowl head. So again, like we talk about this prediction and wanting to have this many losses or this many losses or this many losses. At the end of the day, the way the Buffalo Bills ended last season was perfect. After that Arizona game, we were just crushing people, right? And we carried that momentum into the playoffs, and we beat the Colts and we beat the Ravens, and then we sort of fell a little flat against the Kansas City Chiefs. But we came into the playoffs hot, and we're looking at the first half of the schedule here and hoping for a loss or two here, a loss or two there. But really, I think what's going to matter is the second half of the schedule and how we are pushing ourselves into the playoffs. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is how are we going into the playoffs? And I really like our schedule heading into the playoffs too. I don't know. We're going to get to that right now as we move into the third quarter of the season. Gets a little bit tougher here. We got the Jets at home. No, I'm sorry. The Jets on the road. Then the Colts with the question marks at quarterback right now at home. Then on Thanksgiving night, I should say, in New Orleans. And then we have the not the Miami Dolphins, the New England Patriots at home. So the Jets, the Colts, the Saints, and the Patriots. Gets a little bit tougher here into the third quarter. How do you think the Buffalo Bills respond in the third quarter of the season? Ryan, I'll start with you.
I'll start with saying that I am a lot lower on the Colts than I think a lot of people are. I do not think that let's say Carson Wentz plays most of the games this year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Carson Wentz has nearly as good of a season as Phillip Rivers had last year. And that's about your season right there. I think that's a team that I think, like Washington, that if you get behind early and and you get in negative game script and they can, really let their pass rush tee off and hand the ball off to Jonathan Taylor, that could be a game that, if they don't jump ahead early, could be very tough to win. But like you said, they're built to score quick. They're built to get ahead early. But that's always a possibility. That New Orleans game, New Orleans is a tough place to play, right? But I think that's another team. I think the Colts and New Orleans is kind of tough to gauge right now because those teams with new quarterbacks who were good last year, but we don't know what those quarterbacks are. They're both reclamation projects. Is Jameis Winston going to be a top 12 quarterback like Casey Reed thinks? Or is he going to end up, when the bullets start flying, is he going to revert back to 30 interception Jameis Winston that we saw in Tampa Bay? So, I think those are two games that I think we'll have a lot better picture on as we get into once we start playing actual games and once we have a sample size of how they play. New England at home, I think, is one of those, you handle business at home. You got to beat New England at home. And the Jets on the road, I think we beat the Jets twice. But like I said, I think that's a team that somehow is going to end up winning they beat who? Wow type game, because they'll be like the 2019 Dolphins team that will just kind of be like a kind of pesky, hard to beat team. I think again in here 3-1. I think you got to take one out of the Colts and New Orleans on the road. I hope they win New Orleans on the road because I'll be there Thanksgiving night.
Ooh, good for you.
And
good for you.
Yeah, so I'm very much never been to New Orleans. I'm really looking forward to that.
Dude, the Garden District. Garden District.
Nice.
You've got to hit
fun.
up the Garden District.
Yes, it'll be my first time seeing my my future brother-in-law since I've been engaged. So it'll be a fun night for sure. But I think
Patty O'Brien's, don't make the same mistake I did. Limit yourself to one hurricane. Okay, one hurricane.
but I think 3-1 here is good. Once again, I think you win one. You take you either win Colts or New Orleans, and you handle business against the Jets, and you handle business against New England at home.
Mm-hmm. Dave, what do you think about this stretch in the season? It's an interesting stretch, right? Because obviously you have the Jets, who I think they're moving in the right direction under Robert Saleh and Zach Wilson. I don't think they have the firepower to keep up with the Buffalo Bills in either game this year. Then the Colts, which is, Ryan's not necessarily buying the Carson Wentz hype. And then the Saints got LASIK Jameis. It's in the Superdome. That's still a football team with a lot of talent, despite the fact that they're a little thinner now because of the salary cap. And then obviously they close out with a New England team who, Kendall has mentioned, built their team to stack up against us. So what are your thoughts on that sort of third stretch of the season where things can get maybe a little interesting?
Yeah, that's a good word. It is an interesting stretch. I think because it's the third quarter of the season, and you start thinking about what are the Saints going to be by the time we get to that third quarter of the season? What is Jameis going to have done the first half of the season? Is he going to be sort of that, he is a playmaker, right? He has turned the ball over, at a pretty high rate in the past, but he's also made splash plays frequently enough to where he's been a threat at the position. And so he's going to have that chance. If he's hot, he is a quarterback that is very streaky and can get on a good run. And they'll have Michael Thomas back by then. He's only going to miss probably the first couple weeks of the season. They've got Callaway who's come on. We'll see if that actually translates into the regular season. They've got Kamara. Their defense still has some good players. I know they've lost some, but they still have some good players. And it's in the Superdome. It's on Thanksgiving, which I know, the Bills did go into Dallas a couple of years ago and take care of business on Thanksgiving. So they have a little something to draw back to, right? Like a team on the road, an NFC team on the road. To me, it's a very, very interesting stretch because I actually think Carson Wentz could be quite good for the Colts this year. I think Phillip Rivers last year, he had a very pedestrian sort of 24 touchdowns, just over 4,000 yards, which in today's NFL, 10 years ago, that would have been awesome. But in today's NFL, it's fairly average. And we know they're going to lean on the running game with Taylor. They got Mack back. They've got Hines. They've got a great offensive line. We know the Colts played us well, coached by Frank Reich in that playoff game last year. They're just solid all around. They don't have a ton of weaknesses. They're not like super elite anywhere, but they don't have a ton of weaknesses. So that's an interesting game to me. I think it's going to be a tough game. Jets on the road, again, like you said, they're not there yet, but it's on the road. And then New England at home, that's the game. That's a game you've got to win because going on the road against them later in the next chunk of the schedule is going to be tough. So again, I go 3-1 here, and I think the Jets is the one game you say they're going to win. And then honestly, out of the other 3 games, I don't know which one they're going to lose. I'm not going to predict necessarily which one they're going to lose, but I think they might lose one of those 3 games, and that's going to be okay if they go 3-1 in this stretch by my standard. I think 3-1's fine.
Got some super interesting comments here in the comment section since we've been talking. Don Keith coming in saying, who can have just one hurricane in New Orleans? She has a tattoo due to an O'Brien's hurricane. John DeMarcy saying that when Buffalo drafted Groot that day, he said Buffalo just won the Super Bowl. And he stand for Rousseau pre-drafted. He will accept all the mockery if he is wrong. And I think the defensive line might be a key factor in some of these games, right? In a stretch where you have 3 or 4 tough games in a row, your defensive line being able to wreak havoc on the opponent, being able to fluster the opposing quarterback, being able to force that other quarterback into turnovers. We've seen Carson Wentz turn the ball over. We've seen Jameis Winston turn the ball over. These are turnover-prone quarterbacks. And if our defensive line can sort of that forest through the trees approach or that NASCAR package approach, put the pressure, even if they're not sacking those quarterbacks, and force them to throw up some balls into that secondary, the Buffalo Bills are going to have a good chance of possibly taking all 4 of those football games. So John's right on the money there when he brings up the defensive line. So it should be super interesting. Before we get to the next section here, we got Richard Forbes coming in saying, come on, y'all, smash that damn like, WTF. So if you are in, we got 171 of you in right now. It's almost football season. We got 171 in the house. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Air Raid Hour. I am Judge Mathis, joined by Tilt Money and by Sports Rock 2, a.k.a. Ryan Sullivan, a.k.a. co-host of the 585 Report. So smash that like, and we're going to break down now the final stretch of the Buffalo Bills season. We're going to go 5 games here. All right, this is where things get a little interesting. Easy and interesting, in my opinion. Easy, interesting. Interesting is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay on December 12th, the 4:25 start. Tom Brady versus Josh Allen could be a possible Super Bowl preview. That is a team that is loaded on defense. That is a team that is absolutely loaded on offense. They're a team that can maybe wreak havoc on Josh Allen to a point where he might not be able to be successful. You saw them do that to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and an offense that could keep up with Josh Allen even if he's on a heater. So that is a super interesting team. Tampa Bay is one of the top 3 teams in the National Football League this year, if not the best team in the National Football League this year. Super interesting game there. A super interesting test Like those are the two games you got to have highlighted on the schedule, right? Kansas City and Tampa Bay. The test of, are the Buffalo Bills legit? And I get that playoff football is different than regular season football, but your confidence level is going to go through the roof if they can handle their business in one of or both of those games. Then you got Carolina, who is still super young on both sides of the football. So I think that if you're looking at it from afar on paper right now, you're gonna think this is one of the easier Buffalo Bills wins, especially being at home. Then a really interesting challenge in New England on the road. You know, the things go wrong in the headsets in New England when you're on the road. And you know that they have a good defense on paper, so that should be super interesting. And then Atlanta, who I think is being one of the worst football teams in the National Football League this year. I know Sports Rock disagrees, so we're gonna have a conversation with Ryan Sullivan in a second. He said they could surprise this year. I think they're gonna be god awful. And then Week 18, we're at home versus the Jets, who again don't seem to be too much of a threat this year. So this is an interesting stretch with 3 games that I think are super easy in Carolina, Atlanta, and the Jets, and then 2 games that could really set the tone for whether this team is a Super Bowl contender or not, and that is New England and that is Tampa Bay. So, Dave, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts there on that final stretch of games there?
Yeah, Tampa Bay is going to be super tough. They're going to be playing likely at that point for position for the number 1 seed, and that bye week is still going to be in play likely for them at that point in the season on the road. You know, Tom Brady has owned the Bills. The Bills have not played him as a Buck yet, but in the last nearly 2 decades, he's owned them, right? He's owned the Bills. And so we talked about the mental hurdle of beating the Patriots. Now there's kind of this mental hurdle maybe of beating Tom Brady. And that kind of goes not just for the Bills, but for a lot of teams, right? So it's a great test, like you said. Thankfully, it's in the regular season, but it's a late regular season game. So that game could have some implications, right? If the Bills maybe had stumbled somewhere in the AFC and they really need a win because they stumbled somewhere in the AFC, that could be a big game. The Panthers, to me, honestly, I don't see them as a big threat. I think their defense has a lot of young talent. The Panthers do. I like what they've done in their last few drafts on the defensive side of the ball. We know they drafted Shi Smith this last draft, and we were big fans of him, but I'm not very I guess we'll see, right, at that stage in the season, what's McCaffrey doing, right? Because he obviously missed a ton of time last year. He's already got a lot of tread on the tires. What's Darnold going to be like at that point in the season? Is he already going to have flamed out, or is he going to be
the Philip Walker show?
It could be a similar situation to Jameis, right, where we're like, okay, it's like kind of later in the season. What has he done to kind of put himself either into a level of confidence at that point in the year or a level of a level of shakiness? So they've got some weapons. I know they've got McCaffrey, they've got Robbie Anderson still, they've got DJ Moore. They drafted our guy Tremble that we liked, and he's looked pretty good in the preseason. They do have some talent, but it's hard for me to predict now, 12, 13 games into the year, what Sam Darnold's going to be. So until maybe we see like the first 7, 8 games for him, I'm going to say the Bills should, have that game. Atlanta, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be very good. I'm a big Matt Ryan fan. I feel like I'm constantly defending him.
In fantasy, they'll be good because
they'll
be down a lot.
Matt Ryan's been a good quarterback on bad teams before. So like the Atlanta Falcons have always gotten in their own way. And I really have not been impressed with what I've seen from them in the preseason so far.
I have one thing I need to say before we move on to Ryan here. Randy Harmon says, don't sleep on Carolina. They have one of the best young slot receivers in the game. I didn't realize Randy Hardman was such a Terrence Marshall fan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nice.
Randy, I had no idea that you were such a Terrence Marshall fan. I had no idea. Obviously, anyone who listens or watches this show knows that Randy's a huge fan of the South Carolina Gamecocks, and he was definitely referring to Shi Smith. So I like to have my fun here.
This chunk of 4 games, and we'll call it 5, is really where the 12-5 predictors kind of make their case, right? Because you got the one loss maybe in the first chunk, the one loss in the second, one loss in the third, and then in this 4th chunk, you could say if you're a 12-5 predictor, they're going to lose to Tampa and they're going to lose to New England on the road. That would be, if you're a 12-5 predictor, I think where you're likely headed. I think that the Bills will beat New England on the road, but I do think that they will not beat Tampa Bay. You know what? whatever. They'll win one of the two of those games, I'll say. Like if they beat Tampa Bay, maybe I'll say they'll lose to New England. Like they'll win one of those two, and they'll go 4-1 for my prediction in that stretch of 5 to round out my season-long prediction of 13-4.
All right. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that final stretch of game? I know you're higher on Atlanta than most, but how do you think the Buffalo Bills are going to go into the playoffs? Are they going to go in strong, or are they going to go limping into the playoffs with the expectation from all three of us that the Buffalo Bills make the playoffs this season?
Even if Atlanta is good as I think they are, I think they're still going to be a team that gets in at like 10-7, 9-8, something like that. So once again, I keep using this. There's 3 take care of business games. You got to go in and beat Carolina. You got to go and take care of Atlanta. You got to go and take care of the Jets. That's what good teams do. If they're good, they'll take care of those games. And I really like what Dave said there about we'll know more as the season goes on. You know, I think what will really be telling, and I've been saying this all offseason, the Bills bringing back, 21 of 22 starters from last year. So they are banking on guys they have drafted to develop this year. So we'll know pretty early on, or at least by this point, whether this is the year for Tremaine Edmonds. Does Tremaine Edmonds take that step? Does he become a true elite linebacker? Can Ed Oliver be a game disruptor? And can Dawson Knox add a tight end to this passing attack and be productive? So at this point, we will know whether these players stepped up. Whether, can Greg Rousseau be a guy that produces? Can Mario Addison return a little bit to his Carolina form? So I think a lot of what goes into that Tampa game, because Tampa is bringing back 22 of 22 starters. So we know exactly what they are. And the only real variable on that team is they got a little bit of age there, right? They got Levante Davis, a kind of old, but he still played really well last year. At some point, you got to imagine Tom, probably won't be next year, but Tom Brady is old. He's 43 now. At some point that wall will come. I'm done predicting that wall, but I think that's something you got to keep in the back of your mind. So I think this is a stretch where you need to go 3-2, right? And preferably you want to beat New England at home, right? New England's a team that you're better than, and you want to go in there, but they're going to be a better team this year. And there's a real chance that they could go in and take care of the Bills in that game. And once again, for Tampa Bay, just like Kansas City, I just want to see them go in and be competitive. I want to see them go in, that offensive line be stout and take care of that pass rush. And I want to see the Bills pass rush cause some problems for Tom Brady, because that's how this team's going to win this year. So I think over that last stretch, you go 3-2 and you win Atlanta and you win the Jets. I think you're feeling good, regardless, as long as you're 12-5, 13-4 going out of that stretch. I think you're in good shape and you're not really feeling too bad about your prospects.
Yeah. And I think the real key here is you look at it, and it's these 3 teams that you mentioned, Atlanta, Carolina, and the Jets. I think the Buffalo Bills really want, the goal is obviously the Super Bowl, right? And we're going to talk about that next. Like, what are our expectations once we get to the playoffs? Once we get to the playoffs, the goal is to win that Super Bowl. And I think that momentum is going to play a huge role in that. We went into the playoffs last year with a lot of momentum. We didn't stumble in. We didn't limp in. We didn't walk in backwards. We were charging pretty hard into the playoffs last year. And with 3 games, Atlanta, Carolina, and the Jets, I think we can replicate that. And I think we can be absolutely bombing some teams on our way into the playoffs. And that's the end goal right there, is to get to the playoffs. So once we get to the playoffs, what team do you guys see as the number 1 team that's in our way to get to the Super Bowl? Is it the Kansas City Chiefs? Is it the Baltimore Ravens? Is it the Cleveland Browns? Is it the San Diego Chargers? What do you think? The Los Angeles Chargers. I was just in San Diego. Those poor people. Really great time down there, though, right by Petco Park. They still were flying some Chargers flags.
Is it Gaslamp District? Is that?
Oh, yeah. I love the Gaslamp. Gaslamp, Mission Beach, La Jolla. You can't go wrong in San Diego, man. They don't need a football team. They don't need one. They just
it's a great
relax
place.
And party all
It is
weekend.
a great place. It is nice. It is super nice.
But the people in the comment section and to Ryan and to Dave, what team is the team that stands in our way in the AFC East? What do you got to say, Sports Rock?
Yeah, until it's proven otherwise, it's Kansas City. They got the other best quarterback in the AFC. They've came in and they've rocked us 2 times last year on our way to try to get to the Super Bowl. So until they prove otherwise, and until they fall off, or until we beat them, they are 100% the team you got to beat. You could say, I think you could say maybe Baltimore, because they're another team that's always there that you may end up having to play in the playoffs. This year, you could possibly say the Browns if they're able to get past the Ravens in that AFC North. But for me, I think it's pretty plain cut. It's Kansas City.
How about you, Dave?
Well, I like what Renaissance Man said as far as between Chiefs and Browns, but it's not a tie, right? It can't be. The Chiefs are the team to beat. The Browns are right there, I think, right, with the Bills as far as like being that team that's maybe ready to take that mantle from the Chiefs. So I'd say you have to put the Chiefs at the top. And then I think if you want to say the Bills maybe are slightly ahead of the Browns, that's fine. But I don't think you can put the Browns there yet. Like the Browns did play the Chiefs very well in that playoff game last year. And that Dirty Dan hit that, at the goal line may have been the difference in that game. But the Chiefs, like Ryan said, they spanked us twice last year. We haven't played the Browns really yet since they've become this version of the Browns, right? We played them 2 years ago, and we remember how that game went. We lost, right, to the Browns. So the Ravens are obviously still a threat, but I think the Bills have now kind of proven that they can handle a team that kind of comes at them with that type of game plan, that heavy rush game plan, that mobile quarterback. They can beat a team like that. And I think given that, the Bills probably would feel fairly confident that they could probably beat the Browns, right? Or a team that's very rush heavy, although it has a little bit more of a passing element than the Ravens. But it's the Chiefs, hands down, 100% the team that's in the way in the AFC. Like you would be hard pressed to make an argument that it's not the Chiefs, I guess is the way how could you argue that it's not the Chiefs?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. And if he's still the healthy starting quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs and it's not Chad Henne, then the Chiefs are going to be the team that stands right. But I understand where the people are coming from, right? A lot of people dropping in the Cleveland Browns because they have a solid defense on paper. We got to see that defense actually, produce on a football field. And they got guys like Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and a tight end like Austin Hooper. Some players that can give us fits. David Njoku too. So they got some players who can give us
Odell. Who knows what he can do?
Yeah. So a matchup on paper, it is a little worrisome, but I mean, we handled the Baltimore Ravens, who had a really good defense and a really good running game last year. But the argument made that they didn't have a passing game, and the Browns kind of do.
First in rushing, dead last in passing. That was Baltimore's rankings last year.
I know that I have made this prediction already. I chose the Los Angeles Rams as the team that will be up against the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl. I know that, Dave, you missed that show when me and Kendall did it. I switched to the Rams from the Buccaneers because all of us had, I do believe, the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. But who do you think is the team in the NFC that stands in the Buffalo's way of hoisting their first Lombardi? And then Sports Rock will get to you.
You know what I'm going to say, Judge? I'm going to turn back the clock 1 year, and I'm going to use your prediction from last year, and I'm going to say it's Bills v. Packers in the Super Bowl in 2022, and it's the house divided in the Tilton household with me and my wife.
Wow. I mean, hey, look, they're bringing back the same team that went to pretty much the same team that went to the NFC Championship game last year. They've added Randall Cobb. They've added, which I'm not saying is a great addition, Amari Rodgers. So they've added some guys on the, in the slot to go along with Valdez-Scantling and Devontae Adams on the outside. They've added Kylan Hill. They did lose Corey Linsley up the middle on that offensive line.
They lost Jamal Williams as well. Yeah. I mean, they did, but they still have Aaron Jones. Yeah. They still have Devontae Adams.
AJ Dillon, Kylan Hill. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, you're right. The Packers could be a team that stands in the Buffalo Bills.
Rodgers seems like the type of guy that will be like, everyone thinks I'm an asshole, and I'm gonna go out and prove like, yeah, I'm an asshole, and I'm gonna go all the way to the Super Bowl and just like ride that asshole like stigma. Look, I'm trying to be a little different here. It's easy to pick the Bucs. Obviously, it's very easy to pick the Bucs. So I'm going outside the box, right? I think that the easy pick is Bucks Chiefs, right? Like that is the easy pick, rematch of last year. But I'm gonna go Bills Packers this year.
Nick G is laughing at me. He said they got Randall Cobb though. I knew the second I said it how stupid it sounded. So,
but the thing
please forgive me. Please forgive me.
It's
still better than some of the weapons. They still had better weapons last year because he was relying on like Equinamia St. Brown and like Malik Taylor. So in addition to Alan Lazard, in addition to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, in addition to Devontae Adams, he now has a guy he's comfortable with in Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers, who has a little bit of running back wide receiver flex. So he's got some new guys in there to play with. And even though they lost Jamal Williams, year 2 of AJ Dillon, and they got Kylan Hill, who's a running back prospect that I think we all like. So, yeah, it should be super interesting. Jeff King coming in with a super chat saying, guys, agree or not, I'm a firm believer we need to take the Chiefs in the regular season. If for any reason,
I said that earlier,
to have confidence playing in the playoffs, what's your take?
I said that earlier.
You did say it earlier. To me, I don't think it needs to be a W, but to me, it can't be like it was last year. So last year in the regular season, despite the fact that it was a close game and maybe our game plan would have worked if our defensive line would have stopped the ball, or if, one of Josh Allen's passes was a little more accurate and we could have put up some more points, et cetera, et cetera. It was still pretty embarrassing last year in the regular season. And then after that 9-0 start, it was still pretty darn embarrassing in the AFC championship game. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, I don't know if you need the dub, but it needs to be respectable. It cannot be just absolute embarrassment like it was in those 2 games last year. What are your thoughts, Sports Rock?
Yeah, I think you don't need to beat them. I said it before too. It just needs to be close. And, I think sometimes you see teams that win early, not always, because the team comes in with the chip. They have some tape on what works and what doesn't. So I just think it needs to be close. And that's all I want to see, because I think that's what happened last year. They got spanked in the first game. They couldn't quite figure out what worked against Kansas City. And then that's why they went out and got spanked in the second game. And as for my Super Bowl team, I was going to go with, so when you said Rams and you wanted someone different, I was also going to say Packers. But, I think it's possible. I just want to say, I think it's very possible that a team other than the Bucks gets there. I think there's a really interesting discussion around the Bucks this year, just in the fact that they weren't great in there. I mean, they went 11-5, but they struggled to get 11-5. Someone said it in the chat earlier. Tom Brady threw 3-4 interceptions in that game against the Saints. Like they were not Super Bowl favorites going into the playoffs. So, for all this talk about how good their roster is, they weren't even favorites up going into really that NFC Championship weekend last year.
And to me, I will counterpoint it with this. Even though you're onto something there, I will counterpoint it with last year you did not get the training camp you had because of COVID, and it almost seemed the way that the Tampa Bay sort of kicked it into high gear in the playoffs, that maybe the regular season was their preseason, and Tom Brady was just trying to get things clicking and going there. But yeah, I mean, anything can happen. 1 or 2 injuries could significantly derail that season, but the coaching staff there is phenomenal between Bruce Arians and their special teams coordinator, whose name I'm blanking on, and Todd Bowles and Harold Goodwin and Byron Leftwich, just an A+ staff. And they are just so deep at every position. I mean, running back, Ronald Jones, Keyshawn Vaughn, Leonard Fournette, Giovanni Bernard. Then you look at wide receiver on top of, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, you got Scotty Miller and Antonio Brown and Tyler Johnson and Jalen Darden. And then at tight end, on top of Rob Gronkowski, you have OJ Howard and you have Cameron Brate. They have a very good offensive line. They have a very good defensive line. There are some really good playmakers in the linebacker in the secondary there. They have a good kicker. That team is just so freaking loaded. I don't know how it's possible, but they are just so stacked. We got Dawn coming in, though. Her surprise NFC pick is the Cardinals. I'm going to hard pass on that one. I've made it known before that I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is the kind of guy I don't think would have a panic attack about the first quarter of a playoff game. I don't know if you know what to do with himself. But on paper,
getting back
quick.
really
Talented. Yeah,
they are talented. Getting back really quick to the whole win. Do we need to win against the Chiefs? Do you guys remember that game a couple of years ago where the Chiefs played the Rams and it was 55-51 or something? It was crazy, shootout.
Yeah.
If we get in a game like that and lose, I mean, it would suck, obviously, but you show you go toe to toe with them, like shot for shot, like on
Mhm.
offense. Like I think most people will be happy and encouraged by that. Anyway, just I thought of that game for some
Yeah.
reason.
We got Mr. Keat coming in. I like this question. Can our coaching staff compete with Tampa Bay and Kansas City's? I think so. I think we have a coaching staff. I think Brian Dable probably, you can make the argument, is the best non-head coach play caller in the NFL right now. I mean,
But
the
McDermott
way
needs to get out of his own
Mhm.
way and get confidence in these big games. Like he needs to not go into a shell like he did in that AFC
Yep.
Championship game last year. Like Arians, like, do you ever get the feeling that that dude isn't like full 100% aggressive like all the time? No, like you go into these games and he's like chomping up and down the sideline. He's
Mhm.
like he's into it. And Andy Reid, he's done it before too. Like he McDermott needs to have a little bit more of that killer instinct on him in these big games. He's usually a pretty calculated guy. He's like he does get heated sometimes on the sideline. We'll say that, but like he needs to play to win in these big games, and he needs to just lay it all on the line. And I don't know that we've really seen that from him yet in the biggest of moments.
So we got another comment here from Scott. He says, if Ryan Fitzpatrick makes the playoffs for the first time ever, could Washington football team go on a run to face the Bills in the Super Bowl? Would be a fun Super Bowl rematch. That would be tough to have to root against 50 in the Super Bowl.
But you would easily root against.
We've got Packers, we've got Cardinals. Like we've talked about all these. I'm going with the Rams, and I know Randy said he's in agreement with me. I think Matt Stafford and Josh Allen are going to be toe to toe for MVP this season in the National Football League. Sean McVay is the kind of guy who's has been having success in this league with Jared Goff as the starting quarterback, and Jared Goff literally is just the body, and Sean McVay was the mind, and now Sean McVay actually has a quarterback with a pulse. And I think that LA Rams team is going to be very, very, very tough to beat. And I think that defense with some of the playmakers they have in Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are going to be really, really, they're just going to be they're the type of team that's going to be built for the playoffs and the type of team built to get to that big game in February. And then I think the Buffalo Bills. So 2 years in a row, last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were the first ever team to play a Super Bowl in their host city, and then they ended up winning it. This year, the LA Rams become the second team to play the Super Bowl in their host city, but the first team to lose the Super Bowl in their host city. Bills over Rams, baby. Bills over Rams. You guys,
I love it.
Is the expectation this year is not just a Super Bowl appearance, it's a Super Bowl win, correct, Dave?
I mean, after last year, I didn't even predict the Bills in the Super Bowl. I'm going all in this year, man. I'm predicting them to win. I don't want to be that guy who didn't predict them to win when they do win. So I'm predicting them to win.
And then Don, we'll get you super chat real quick. Ryan, expectation, it's Super Bowl or bust. Would you be content with a Super Bowl loss as a Bills fan?
Stop it. Just stop it.
I mean, am I going to be happy with a loss? No, but we had Bruce exclusive on our podcast a couple weeks ago back on 5 Report. Mm-hmm. And he said you can't, in a sport that's any given Sunday, you can't also be Super Bowl and bust. I'm encouraged that this team is built to win for years. And listen, I'm 26. I'm a child of the drought through and through. So I think they absolutely can win the Super Bowl. There's a part in the back of my head that tells me not to predict it. Like even last year, until they had the AFC East wrapped up, I didn't believe they were going to win it. There's always that voice inside the back of my head. So I'm not superstitious. I'm a little stitious. I think they can win the Super Bowl, but I'm really afraid to say it out loud because I've experienced so much pain in my lifetime.
Well, let me say this. I think there's is there some connotation though with Super Bowl or bust that it's like a one-time chance to do it, whereas the Bills really are, like you said, set up to really have sustained potential to be a contender every year. So it's almost like the Bills are, like we always talk about these windows, like as long as Josh Allen's the quarterback and he's as good as he was last year, if not better, it'll be like the Russell Wilson situation. It'll be like the Aaron Rodgers situation or Drew Brees when he was with the Saints before he retired. It's like your expectation, if you're those organizations every year, is that you are going to contend for a Super Bowl. And that one season where it all comes together, you may win it. Like Rodgers has only won one. Drew Brees has only won one. We know Russell Wilson should have won two, but obviously the goal line play with against the
that
Packers.
one's on Pete Carroll.
But because of those quarterbacks, they have to be in the conversation every year as a contender, and that's where the Bills have now kind of put themselves. Now they haven't made it to the big game yet, but they've now put themselves in that conversation where they are a contender as long as Josh Allen plays to the caliber that he has the potential to. So that's kind of, I think, where we get this, like, it's more like Super Bowl. It's more like you got to get to the Super Bowl once in this window at least, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like,
it almost seems to me like the expectation from here on out, every year that Josh Allen is the starting quarterback, the expectation is the Buffalo Bills will be Super Bowl contenders. There will be some years where it's a Super Bowl or bust feeling, like this year where we're really loaded. There might be some years where we might get decimated by some guys leaving in UFA and stuff. But as long as Josh Allen's still the quarterback, there's always still that chance when you get to the playoffs that it can happen. And as long as Josh Allen's a starting quarterback for this team, until he, turns 35 years old and turns into Ben Roethlisberger, the expectation is always, I think, going to be for the Buffalo Bills to be supposed to. And man, that's such a weird feeling, but I love it.
I mean, the Saints didn't always have great teams around Drew Brees during this 15 years he was with the Saints. Like the Seahawks, we know, have got into some cap trouble when they paid all the guys on defense, and it kind of like fell apart on them a little bit. Like, right, the team's constantly sort of changing and ebbing and flowing around the quarterbacks, other than a few core guys. But Josh Allen's going to be the core guy, right? And like Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen will outlast Stephon Diggs in a Bills uniform. Josh Allen will outlast pretty much anybody else that's on the roster right now that's in a Bills uniform. So the team is going to be different around him every year in some form or fashion. But like you said, Steve, this year kind of feels more like a Super Bowl or bust because the Bills are pretty loaded, at least on paper, right? So,
and then switching here to something Sports Rock mentioned earlier that could really derail a season, with Dallas being decimated by COVID today, all their players being vaccinated that were put on this list that can't play on Thursday. I know I saw Zach Martin. I wasn't sure. I don't know if there are any additional names. I've been driving all day back from San Diego, so I'm not completely up to date. I know Zach Martin is out. Do you think there will be teams forfeit or lose because of it? I know there was this viral video of Tom Brady going around, right, where he was talking about, like, the defense's liability, hitting the quarterback, all that stuff. And people were raving about Tom Brady and just the way he was phrasing things and talking about the game and being so candid and being so open and how he's so much more likable now. Tom Brady has been pretty spot on with his analysis of a lot of things. And one of the things that Tom Brady also has said in the past week or two is he thinks that COVID is going to have a bigger effect on the National Football League this year than it did last year. And I think he's right, because last year there was no vaccine. And the NFL was like, you all your asses are staying in this little bubble that we're going to create for you. Like from the team plane to the team hotel, to this, to that, to this, to that. Like your asses are quarantined hard, and we're going to get through this season. And the onus is on everyone, us included, to get these games played. Now it appears like the NFL, with the vaccine now available, is saying to the NFL teams, all right, the onus is on you now. All right. The onus is on you, the players. We're not going to set the restrictions. If you want to go out for dinner the night before a game, if you want to take your kids to, here or there and go out in public and do these charity events and do all these different things and do meet and greets with fans and take unmasked photographs with them, like that's on you. And one of the things that we have learned over the past month or two is that even though vaccines are 99% effective against hospitalization and death, they are not 99% effective against catching the disease. And if you catch it, you're out for 10 days. So if these players are out and they're doing charity events, if these players are out and they are hanging out with their families and going to dinner and going out with their buddies during the week, chances are they're probably going to catch this darn thing. I know the job that I'm currently at, there's 40 people in a room every day. I'm a teacher. There's 40 people in the room every day. It's about 30 every day now with COVID, just because people are quarantined or people have caught it and they're out for 10 days. Hundreds of people in a school of thousands every week are gone. They're not sick. They're not dying. They just can't be there because they've caught it or you were near someone who's caught it. So it's going to play a massive role in the National Football League this year. And they've taken the onus from themselves. Like, we're going to do everything as the National Football League to protect you. All right, guys, on you now. Figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, go fuck yourself. You're going to lose some football games. That's almost what it seems like the NFL's philosophy is this year. What are you guys thinking about in terms of, how serious the NFL is going to be with teams forfeiting games and teams playing severely shorthanded? Dave, what do you think?
Well, we kind of got some of these, I don't want to call them threats, but we got some of this type of messaging last year as well. Obviously, there was no vaccine last year. And I think to some extent, that's why the NFL was a little bit more lenient with trying to reschedule things. And it was almost like the behavior of whether or not you were following protocols last year was like less important than it is now that there's a vaccine, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic. Like it's one of those things I just like kind of observe, and I just I just see how it plays out. I don't really necessarily have a strong view one way or the other on it, because I know it's a difficult situation to try to navigate, whether you're the NFL, whether you're the players, whether you're individual organizations. Like, it's tough, right? Because like the rules, it's almost like in a world where there was no vaccine, like there was a lot more leniency, which is kind of funny, right? Because you would think it would be almost the opposite. In a world where there is a vaccine and people are vaccinated and are still getting it, you're punishing them. You're still punishing them, which is kind of like, it's kind of a weird dynamic, but I don't want to get too much into it. It's just, I'm just going to observe and I'm going to see how it plays out. As far as games actually getting forfeited, I think that is more of what do they say online? A subtweet, right? Like it's more of it's more of like a subtweet, like trying to like encourage a certain behavior so that it doesn't have to get to that type of situation. Because I don't think the NFL wants that to happen.
And it should get better to a certain extent, because it is 2 negative tests within 24 hours apart. And the situation the Bills found themselves in was on Thursday, a trainer had come down with COVID, even though he was asymptomatic, and a bunch of players were sent home. Matt Milano, and I believe it was Star Lotulelei or Vernon Butler, one of them got to come back the next day because they tested negative and they were vaccinated. Other players had to stay home for 5 days, Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis, because they were not vaccinated. You run into that situation in the regular season. It's a Thursday in the weight room. There's a trainer, catches COVID. He's asymptomatic. There were 5 players that guy was working in close contact with that day. Those unvaccinated players are automatically missing that Sunday's game. Guys like Gabriel Davis, guys like Cole Beasley, if they're in close contact. Other guys got to have those 2 negative tests within those 40 hours to come back, but they're still probably missing some practice time as well. Now, the NFL has come in and they have put some more rules in effect. I believe the new rule is, like, if you're in the gym or whatever, like you are you're a training staff guy, you're a support staff person, vaccinated or not vaccinated, I believe they all have to have a mask on now. Like the people in the weight room and the trainers and stuff all have to have a mask on now. So I believe that helps with the close contact, right? Because like if they're wearing a mask, then I do believe that might change some of the rules a little bit, whether they've caught COVID or not. So it should be interesting. Like the NFL and the NFLPA have been working together to tighten some things up. But it's hard to prognosticate, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's definitely something that's going to be worth keeping an eye out on as the regular season progresses. First week of the season, second week of the season, when you see these things happen, like what we're seeing in Dallas right now. Like I said, I haven't done the research yet on what exactly is going on Dallas. When this show is over, I'm probably going to go read a couple articles and try to figure out and get to the bottom of what's going on in Dallas, where those players are being placed, why they're being placed there, and if they're missing the game or not. I know Zach Martin is missing the game, so we got to figure out. I think he tested positive, so he has to miss the 10 days because he's actually positive despite being vaccinated. So it's going to be super interesting to figure out what's going on. And it's definitely going to be something. It's going to be a case study the first month of the season. What are the situations and what's going on? So, definitely worth checking out. We got Ryan Teal coming in saying, let's get 100 likes. Everyone, we got 174 of you in here and less than 100 likes apparently. So if you think
we're only 12 away,
if you think just like the three of us think, the Buffalo Bills are Super Bowl favorites this year, and the Buffalo Bills are going to be Super Bowl contenders for a long, long time. Smash that like button for us and let's get over 100 likes. We'd really appreciate it. Helps us with something called an algorithm. I don't know. I'm not really good with those things. I leave that up to the smart people behind the scenes like Bobby and Pierre to figure out what we need to do to get more eyeballs. I just sit here and spew weird things out my mouth for 2 hours. All right, like now by leaving an awkward pause with my co-host having nothing to say. All right, so I know, Dave, that you're unfortunately going to miss Thursday's preview show because you will be moving, getting out of your house, getting into a new house. So take a couple of minutes here to talk about what your expectations are for the game, some predictions you have, and some of the matchups you're looking forward to.
Yeah, you are going to see a lot of people talk this week about the Bills D-line after a down year last year and being revamped this year, matching up against that Steelers offensive line. That's going to be the biggest advantage the Bills have in this game matchup wise, as far as really trying to put the Steelers away early, right? Getting them behind, forcing them into passing situations, which we know they haven't been great at, the deep passing game anyway, and letting that defensive line, like you said earlier, Steve, come in waves against that very inexperienced and below average Steelers offensive line. If the Bills can do that, they should have no problems winning this game. The chance the Steelers have is with that inexperienced offensive line. It's the common thing you hear is that run blocking is easier than pass blocking if you're an offensive line. If the Steelers can somehow get any kind of running game going with Najee Harris, that would really be the only way they could really probably stay in this game. But I do think the Bills at home, the home crowd starving for that, that full capacity home game. You were there for that Packers preseason game. It was freaking packed for a preseason game. Fans were into it. The home crowd, the Bills will get it going week one. I think they will cover that 6.5 week one. I'm going to predict that the Bills win 31-17 week one.
How about you, Sports Rock? We're not going to have you for Thursday's show. I'll be joined by Kendall. So what are your thoughts on the Bills and the Steelers? And then we're going to get to Gary Godshaw's super chat here about some in-season rushing predictions.
So I want to see, like I talked about a couple minutes ago, are drafted players from 18 and 19 to see if they make the step. I want to see if Edmonds looks better. I want to see if Ed Oliver is disruptive. I want to see if Greg Rousseau is disruptive. And I want to see, and then I just want to see a complete game. Remember last year, the start of last year, the story was third quarter Brian Dable. Every third quarter he came in and he let a team back into the game. And that's why we had a lower point differential than a lot of the other teams in the AFC that we were better than. So I just want to see a nice, complete game. With that said, I'm coming off as the hater today. I think it's going to be a little bit of closer than a game. I think they cover, but I am going to go 30 to 20 or 30 to 21.
I like that.
Right. I like that. So now we have Gary Godshaw coming in with the super chat. Always appreciate the super chatters, and thank you so much, Gary. I don't think I've ever seen a super chat from Gary before on this show. Maybe he's super chat on some other shows. So welcome, Gary, and thank you for the super chat. He says, any prediction for full season rushing yards and touchdowns, Singletary and Moss? Dave, I'll start with you. I know Devin Singletary last year, just for reference, had 156 carries, 4.4 yards per carry average, 687 yards, 2 touchdowns. Zach Moss had 112 carries for 481, a 4.3 yards per carry average, and 4 touchdowns. So how do you think, what kind of difference do you think we're going to see this year in the Buffalo Bills running game from those two guys?
I could definitely see a situation where Moss maybe has more touchdowns, but I want to say this right now. I don't think you're going to see a lot of rushing touchdowns from running backs, from Bills running backs. I think, and when I say a lot, I mean, I think you might see 5 apiece, maybe like 7 max for one guy. I don't think you're going to
Mhm.
see like double-digit rushing touchdowns from either running back. And I would say, uh, a good benchmark maybe would be double-digit rushing touchdowns combined from all the running backs. Like that might not even be that easy of a task, because I think you're going to get a lot of Josh Allen running around near the goal line. You might even see some Reggie Gilliam, although I guess technically he's fullback, so I guess he would count as a running back. As far as Moss and Singletary, I like Singletary to lead in yards. I think Moss will probably have maybe a touchdown or two more. But I do think that there's been a lot of talk about Singletary this offseason, and not just from us, from the coaching staff as well, right? They've praised him. They've praised his power as well, and he's gotten first crack each time so far in practice and in the preseason. So as we sit here right now on September 6th, heading into week 1, I'll say Devin Singletary leads the running backs in yards, and maybe Moss gets him by like one or two touchdowns.
All right, Sports Rock, what do you got? What are your predictions for the Buffalo Bills running game in 2021?
I know Singletary was getting the touches first in this preseason, but you looked at the trajectory last year and where it was heading, and it was going towards Zach Moss. I think Zach Moss is someone you want to give the ball to late, because you don't necessarily, he's more of a power back. I always think back to that Steelers game on Sunday night where he almost single-handedly ran that clock out for 7 minutes at the end of the game. I think he's who they see long-term, or at least for the next couple of years, the guy who they'd like to see as that 1A. But I think so much of it depends on game plan on a week-to-week basis. I don't think any of them put up a crazy amount of production, and I think Tilt, you hit it on the head that when you get in the red zone, when you get near the goal line, he's gonna be the guy you give the ball to. So I think just by that measure, and just because of that, he'll have more touchdowns than Devin Singletary.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at a little bit. So one of the things that I like to look at is yards per carry. Last year, Devin Singletary 4.4, Zach Moss 4.3. I think the Buffalo Bills might not give the running backs more targets this season, but they will, I think, improve their yards per carry average. So did a little bit of math here, which is new for me, so please bear with me. But I do think, and I've mentioned this in the last 2 shows, I think the one change you will see is I think when a running back goes on a heater, and I think the Buffalo Bills will stick with that back. So last year you saw the Buffalo Bills split carries. When healthy, they split carries. It would be like 8-8, or it would be like 9-7, or it would be like 12-9. Like those were the sort of target shares and carry shares that you would see between Zach Moss and Devin Singletary on a game day when both were 100% healthy. I think that changes this year. And if a running back gets on a heater, I think they stick with that guy and give him 16, 17 carries a game. But that being said, if I'm going to bump them up to 5 yards per carry, I'm going to give Devin Singletary 170 carries this year instead of 156. I'm going to give Zach Moss 135 carries this year instead of 112, which would give Singletary 850 yards on the season and Zach Moss 625 yards on the season. And I think both guys will push 3 to 6 touchdowns. So I'll just give that a nice even 10 touchdowns between the two. So between the two running backs, Singletary and Moss, I think they will play around the same. I think that Devin Singletary will get more of the touches, and I think combined they'll be pushing 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns this season, which is pretty good. I really do think the Buffalo Bills passing offense this year is just going to be so fucking good that the running game is just going to have to be better, because like everyone's just going to be playing the pass. I just think that the Buffalo Bills are in for a record-breaking passing season, and if the running backs can't just feast off of that and make the most out of the carries they get, I don't know what to tell them at this point. It might be Bobby Johnson's fault if they can't figure that one out. So maybe the Buffalo Bills next offseason might have to bring in a running back offensive line coach to go along with a pass blocking offensive line coach if Bobby Johnson can get that pass blocking down tight for for Josh Allen. We got Steelers Nation, so we got Steelers fan in here coming in and saying, you guys haven't beaten us like that in years. It's going to be a close game like the last 2 games we played. It very well could be, and that is something that a couple people have mentioned. The Buffalo Bills, it was Josh Allen versus Duck Hodges a few years ago, and the Buffalo Bills came on top, but it was a close one. And then last year, it was obviously a very tight game where the Buffalo Bills took over in the second half. I do think this is a different situation, though. Both of those games were late in the season. Both of those games were, the Steelers game the first time or the second time around was in some really inclement weather. this game, from all things that I can tell, the weather report is looking pretty good for Sunday. It's at home. It's in front of a full sold out stadium for the first time in a couple of years. I just think that the Buffalo Bills both teams are going to be a little rusty, and I think the Buffalo Bills have the firepower to really take advantage of that. I don't think the Steelers have the firepower to take advantage of that. But again, I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to disrespect your team in any way, Steelers Nation, even though I probably have disrespected them multiple times on this show, and I do apologize for that. I believe I've called them a house of cards at least 25 times this offseason. It's just a phrase I really like. But if I was a Steelers fan, I wouldn't be saying that. I would be very positive.
I just think of that fantasy commercial they show like every year with the guy on like the treadmill and he's just like falling backwards and his team name was like House of Cards and he was like 0-12 or whatever.
Yeah, and it's just like trust me, like I am. People know this about me. I'm like I mentioned, I'm Mr. Worrisome. I'm Mr. Conservative. I think the sky is falling when we're down 3-0. Like I have a heart attack if we don't have a 2-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter. Like I can't. That's just who I am as a fan. Yet I feel not a single ounce of concern for Sunday's game. Not a single. I haven't even thought about the possibility of losing. That could all come crashing down to earth about 5 minutes at 1:05 p.m. on Sunday. And I'm not trying to say this to be disrespectful to the Steelers fan in the comment section. I'm just being brutally honest with you. And again, it could make me sound dumb as shit 5 days from now, and you can come back here and you can make fun of me and I'll own
Steelers
it.
Get a first down and you like
I
run out of the room.
Like come back here next Monday and just drag me. Absolutely drag me if I'm wrong, but I don't have an ounce of concern about Sunday. And I think we win the game by 2 touchdowns running away. Like I've never been this confident going up against a team that's not considered bad in a long time. In a long time.
Man,
I don't know. Sports Rock, what are your thoughts?
I hope we're not getting ahead
Am I too confident?
I mean, no, I think the roster and the evidence of what we know so far backs you up.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, it's any given Sunday, and like I think I'm just more pessimistic than maybe not pessimistic, but anxious than the average Bills fan. That I always like I don't feel easy until it's double zeros, and even then, like it's anything can happen. And maybe you get a fresher Ben, right? Maybe Ben, early in the season, rested, less throws on that arm could be a little bit better. And I always come back to Mike Tomlin too, right? Mike Tomlin, say what you want about how bad this roster is. Talk about how bad last year's roster is, how old it is. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season, and he's like the second most tenured NFL coach in the NFL right now, right? It is a well-coached team, regardless of the talent. Like, it's like those early McDermott teams, the playoff team, that first 10-6 team. They have the ability to play above themselves. They have ability to play above their talent. So I think on the paper, Vegas agrees with you. 6.5 line. I can't think of the last time. They probably had a couple last year, but 6.5. The line is a pretty big line.
That's a big line.
Yeah, and I'm not a betting man, but I'll take. I'm taking your word for it on that. So, but once again, any given and the fact that they're not trash team. So I think you're justified in your confidence. But for me and how I watch football and how I've digested the Bills overall this year, I'm about a notch off that.
Mm-hmm. We got Don coming in saying, "Hey guys, please root for my Razorback Hogs against Texas on Saturday. It's a sellout, 80,000 people in 95-degree weather." I'm going to pray for them at this point with an expected heat index of 105. Man, some of these early season football games in this heat is just absolutely brutal. But the reason why I put Don's comment up there is because college football is back. And I know you guys are with me in the fact that you guys are both pretty big college football fans. And I want to talk a little bit about maybe just close out the show with a couple of maybe some stories of college football this weekend. I was really happy for my guy, Casey Reed. And then it all came crashing down for him in FSU Notre Dame. Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. What a fucking stud that guy is. And same with Myers, the tight end. Both those guys are going to be like top 5, top 10 picks. Kyle Hamilton is literally Julio Jones in the secondary of that Notre Dame defense with the instincts of Micah Hyde. It's disgusting. That interception he had on Travis, he ran across the football field and just picked it off like at the boundary. It was insane. He read the quarterback where the football field was going and ran 30 freaking yards to pick that pass off. It was nuts. But my favorite story from the weekend was probably the Iowa Hawkeyes, and Iowa's Riley Moss, cornerback Riley Moss. He had 2 pick sixes in the game for Iowa football. PFF had this to say about him after the game. Along with those 2 touchdowns, Moss forced a couple of incompletions and didn't allow a single catch across 6 targets in coverage. Last season, the former 2-star recruit was one of the best zone corners in college football, and his day against the Hoosiers showed more of the same. On top of all of this, his 2 pick sixes, the fact that he's one of the best zone corners in college football. I'm gonna see if I can get this. The man wore an Iowa wrestling sweatshirt to his post-game press conference.
And now he'll be mocked to the Bills in every
mock draft should have Riley Moss in it from here until the end of time.
Yep.
Unbelievable story for Riley Moss. Anything stick out to you this weekend, Sports Rock, watching any college football? I know your boy in Syracuse. Talk about your boy in Syracuse.
Yeah, I mean, Syracuse is going to be pretty terrible this year, but we got Garrett Williams, who's going to be another cornerback who could come out this year, could say in another year, but
best name in college football. Name in college football. Talk about him.
That's freshman. Deuce Check, freshman, Deuce Chestnut, best corner in college football already. Already love him. Already going to be a great 3 years, even if this team is going to be terrible. He's a tackling machine. Looks like a McDermott corner that will get mocked to him endlessly, and they'll break my heart never take. They got Garrett Williams, who's another really great corner who could come out this year, and I'm sure I'll mock him to the Bills just to get my heart broken. And we got a really fun freshman running back in Sean Tucker. Tommy DeVito's trash, and I think the Dino Babers aura is kind of worn off. So it's going to be they'll go win like 3 games, but it'll be a much more enjoyable 3 games than last year when Andre Sisco was hurt and everything.
You got Jack coming in and supporting you, saying Sean Tucker, Sean Tucker's a certified stud. Dave, anything stick out to you wearing college football or watching college football this weekend?
Yeah, it was a great weekend for me.
So nice.
Mean, when I say state, NC State beat South Florida. NC State rarely open against the D1 FBS team. We did this year. We took it to them. Wasn't the best game from Leary, but good enough and just totally dominating. I know South Florida is not very good, but to beat an FBS team week 1. And then what happens a day later? Those poor Tar Heels just get beat by Virginia Tech. Sam Howell looks like crap. Everyone's like, he's going to be a top 5 pick. And he still might be, but man, 1 TD, 3 picks, and losing to Virginia Tech opening weekend, the Tar Heels, man, that was a good weekend for me in college football.
Janelle, if you have, or John L, if you have seen the show before, we are draft junkies, and it's always draft season on the Air Raid Hour. We're probably going to take about 5-10 minutes every week between the 2 shows. I mean, we're almost at the 2-hour mark here. We're allowed to talk a little. We're allowed to talk a little draft. I think one of my favorite parts of draft, my 2 favorite parts of college football this weekend. Number 1, Casey sent us the picture of him dressed up and down in his FSU garb, holding his daughter in his hand, saying "First Daddy-Daughter FSU game." That was an amazing moment for him. But then I went right back to hating him on Twitter. This morning, I posted a video of Trey McBride, one of our favorite prospects, tight end out of Colorado State, absolute beast. And I said, tight end Trey McBride, remember the name. And then I tagged Kendall and I tagged Casey in the tweet. And I said, and I was tagging them out of respect because Kendall and Casey were the first 2 guys to discover him late last season when they were scouting Darren Hall. So I was doing it out of respect. And what are the comments to me? Kendall claps at me. What does he say? Kendall says, I posted about this guy back in June when I was watching Darren Hall tape. Eye roll. He eye rolled me. And then Casey goes, pretty sure Kendall and I had a conversation about him last year. No, guys. That's why I was trying to give them credit. And they think I'm out here disrespecting him. Unbelievable. I can't even be complimentary to people without them being down my throat. But what a week it was in college football. Yeah, Riley Moss. The Air Raid Hour is not hour. We might have to change the name of the show.
Yeah.
The Air Raid Experience, maybe.
Ooh.
There we go. Like the Michael Vick experience back in the day. But that should just about do it for us tonight, folks. I will be back on Thursday with Kendall to break down the Steelers. I'll be talking with the Pittsburgh Bills backers tomorrow, and I'll also be breaking down Steelers a little bit with some Pittsburgh Steelers podcasters this week as well. Have some clips for you on the Air Raid Hour from both of those interviews, and I'll have some clips for you on the BF Tailgate. And you can also catch the full audio of both of those interviews, plus the recasts of all of these shows. If you head on over, and it says it right there at the bottom, on top of joining us live every Monday, Thursday at 9 p.m. and smashing that like if you're here, smash that like for us, you can join us via audio and catch us on demand and get some exclusive audio by following Buffalo Football Weekly on any of the major podcasting platforms that you follow. I do not believe we're on Apple yet. Still working on it. Takes a few days, but we are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, all those different things. So if you're looking for some exclusive Air Raid Hour content, some draft talk, some Bills backers interviews, some opposing podcasters and stuff interviews, catch that. Plus the BF Tailgate on Sunday, which I'm pretty pumped for. Ryan, you going to be there this Sunday for the BF Tailgate? I haven't sent out the schedule yet or the roster yet, but are you going to be one of the volunteers to pay tribute this Sunday morning?
Yeah, if I get invited, absolutely.
Oh, you standing invitation to the BF Tailgate, as we'll be rotating through. Sad to say we have lost Jeff Landers this year for the BF Tailgate. He's got something called a family, which I don't know anything about. I don't have kids yet, so I don't have to worry about those type of things. But we've lost Jeff Landers, so I'm going to do my best to fill in as much as possible as the facilitator of the BF Tailgate, and we'll have people like Dave, people like Sports Rock, Mitch Broder, Casey Reed, Kyle Knapp, Zach Vaughn, Jeremy, California Buffalo. We're going to have a whole rotating Clay Troya. We're going to have you covered on the BF Tailgate this season. So stick with us here on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube. Stick with us, Buffalo Football Weekly, for your podcasting needs. Follow Ryan and the 585 Report on Twitter and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast stuff. And their podcast also drops on demand on YouTube on what, Saturdays?
Saturdays, yep.
So their podcast drops on Saturdays as well. So Saturday afternoon, you can tune in, watch Ryan and Mitch and the 585 Report before the Bills game every Sunday. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.